Evangelion characters have multiple layers to explore and complex psychological personalities to be experienced. Gendo Ikari is one of those characters that, even though has a reduced screen time compared to that of Shinji, Asuka, and Misato, his impact in the world is what drives the whole story. As others, Gendo goes through a pristine character development. Motivations that were forged not only by experiences, but from people surrounding him. A brilliant statistician or a mad scientist. Perhaps just a coward that wanted to escape reality. Let's take a closer look to his story and see if we can understand Gendo. Did you know that every time you like my videos, Misato gets a beer, Asuka a bento box, and Rei gets a knife? This is a real story. So don't forget to do it and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps me bring in more videos right to you. With that being said, let's begin. The first time we see Gendo Ikari in both editions is very early. He does not have direct control over the defense operations. Instead, the GSSDF and the UN are. There is a difference in Rebuild, where Gendo reveals more information about the angels, the fruit of wisdom, and the fruit of life. We notice that he is already wearing his white gloves, which indicates that he already burned his hand saving Rei from her entry block after her EVA unit went berserk. We will find out about that later. Shinji gets to the geofront with Misato, and as soon as he gets in, a red light turns on, tinting the whole screen for the next few seconds. At that moment, Shinji is asking about his father, as for soon he will have to face him. Color red in Evangelion is a symbol for pain, for suffering, for reality. Shinji's relationship with his father has always been difficult. He doesn't even know what Gendo does for a living. Then we see flashbacks of a bag and a child crying, letting us know that Shinji was sent away very young, which was a traumatic experience. In Rebuild, the SDAT makes an appearance. This time, without numbers, is off. The story has not begun yet. The sequence ends with Nerve Train moving downwards. Then Misato asks Shinji for the papers that his father sent him. Notice how it was put together again with tape, which is an indication that Shinji shredded the letter as soon as he read it, and then had second thoughts and put it back together before heading to Tokyo 3. This is in summary the relationship he had with his father so far in his life. One of anger, but also one of acceptance. Shinji believes that the only way to get closer to his father is by being useful to him. Misato understands that Shinji's relationship with Gendo is a complex one, just like hers and her father. During their exchange, Misato sees in Shinji a similarity with Gendo. As for she tells Ritsuko, they are both unendearing. Koso will let us know that this will be their first meeting in 3 years, which means that even though Gendo pushed Shinji away very young, they have met later on, when Shinji was around 11. This happens just before the Ikari family get reunited, with the father, the son, and the mother. The positioning of the characters reflects authority. Gendo upstairs looking downwards to Shinji with a glass in front of him, separating himself from his wife and son. Shinji downstairs looking upwards to his father and his mother's side without understanding what they want from him. And Yui in the middle, between father and son, inside the almighty Evangelion unit. Of course, at this point of the story, we don't know any of this. Neither does Shinji, but when we rewatch it entirely, we have other perspective. Gendo asks Shinji to pilot the unit. He refuses, and tries to be convinced by all of the adults in the room to do so. Misato tells him to stop running away from his father and himself. But only Shinji understands his inner pain of being rejected, abandoned, of being alone, and now he faces the reality, as his father states that if he is not going to do it, then he has to leave. For many years, the fandom has speculated that Shinji and Gendo's relationship is somehow similar to Anno's relationship with his father. This has never been proven, and people close to Anno have stated that his relationship with his dad was pretty good. In 1997, a book titled Schizo was published. In it, there is a compilation of interviews to Hideki Anno and others in Gainax. In one of the interviews by Kentaro Takekuma, Anno stated that Nerve is how he perceives Gainax, being just a group of amateurs. and Gendo as his own shadow, a pressure that society has put on him. And that is exactly what we're seeing. NERV, a group of scientists and engineers that never seen real combat in their lives, trying to pressure a 14 years old to pilot a weapon of mass destruction, with no preparation or experience, just because the adults in the room say so, appealing to his sense of guiltiness. These adults, Gendo, they are trying to manipulate him. After all this, Gendo sees that the angel is getting closer and asks for Rei. She will have to pilot and save the day, even if she has multiple injuries and can barely move. This is another manipulation on his behalf. If he was not able to convince him, then a convalescent Rei will. In Neon Genesis Evangelion, EVA Unit 1 raises its hand to protect Shinji from falling debris. Gendo shows a smile. This might be because for the first time he can be sure that Yui is alive within the unit, and all of his work, his version of the Human Instrumentality project, can be done. This was a very important moment for Gendo Ikari. This was changed in Rebuild. EVA 1 does not raise its arm, which is an indication that the new edition, although similar, it will have its differences. But in both cases, Gendo is sure about one thing: Yui won't let Shinji die. Gendo has no issues to expend every resource necessary, provided not only by Cele but by world governments, to achieve his goals. As for the non-monolith versions of Cele, complains that the Ikari family has become really expensive, now that not only they are financing Gendo's projects but also Shinji inexperience and EVA Unit 1 with Yui inside it. All of this happens in a dark room with lines that resembles their own AT fields, while they unveil that the target is to complete the Human Instrumentality program. Gendo's persona not only can be studied with his relationship with Shinji or his overbosses at Cele, but also with his relationship with Rei, which seems to be a father-daughter relationship is nothing of sorts, as for Gendo only uses her to fulfill his goals. Was Gendo really going to put an injured Rei in Unit 1 to fight Sakiel if Shinji continues to refuse? We will never know, and you can make arguments both ways. Gendo knows that his options are limited, because at that point of the story he only had 2 pilots at his disposal. Shinji, who would synchronize with his mother in Unit 1, and Rei, who is not only Yui's clone, but also the key for his scenario. Either way, in the aftermath of Sakiel's battle, Gendo is more concerned about the functionality of the clone than to praise his son for his success, to who looks down without saying a word. However, Gendo do trust in Ritsuko and Misato. As for he leaves Tokyo 3 multiple times throughout the story, leaving them in charge. Gendo Ikari is also kind of a celebrity in Japan at that time. People have heard of him, and this is because Yui Ikari's death was reported by newspaper at the time of her disappearance, for Gendo was considered to be the main suspect of the murder. Gendo Ikari has always been very pragmatic. As for Shinji leaves for the first time, he just doesn't care. He comes up with the idea that an injured Rei can pilot EVA 1, and asks Ritsuko to set it up for her, while they are still wait for the Marduk Institute selection of a 4th child. Gendo doesn't know that Unit 1 now can be piloted only by Shinji, as for the bond with his mother has strengthened. But if Gendo sees Rei as a tool, why there are some occasions in which he has shown to care about her? Well, the simplest explanation will be that she is still Yui's clone, and has to replace her in his life until he reunites with his wife. He doesn't want to see his wife die for a second time. Because of that, Gendo burns his hand and lost his original sets of glasses. When Shinji realizes this, gets jealous. Why this girl that is not blood related to him has a better relationship with his father than his own son. From that point onwards, Shinji will start to develop interest in finding out more about Rei and get closer to her. And then we have Ritsuko, whose relationship with Rei was always difficult. She'd rather ask Shinji for a favor than go herself and see her. And yes, it's because of Gendo. Going back to Shinji and Rei, when he puts on his father's glasses on Rei's apartment, he has a diffuse image on Rei. This obviously means that Shinji doesn't have the same vision condition that his father does, but also may refer on how Gendo sees Rei. This blurry figure that reminds him of his wife, who is nude, vulnerable, but at the same time is not. On the other hand, Rei's reaction to Shinji touching Gendo's glasses is a bit out of character. As for we don't see this reaction out of this particular Rei a lot. These glasses are precious treasure for her. is the connection that both Gendo and Rei has, a memento of the day that her creator felt worried about her. Rei's reactions in the following sequence show some humanity in the character for the first time, and again, it is because of Gendo. It is very well established that she is angry, not because he entered her apartment uninvited and that touched her breast, but because she feels that the special sacred bond between her and her creator has been desecrated, to the point that Rei slaps Shinji just because he doubts of his father's work. He mistrusts him, but also can be argued that at this point of the story, Rei sees in Shinji a threat that could derail her relationship with Gendo. Because at the end of the day, she has to accept that Shinji is his son, and she is just a tool, a mean for a goal, ignoring completely that both of them are just disposable assets, from Hikari's perspective. This is again revisited when Shinji gets injured by Ramil's attack. Rei is waiting with Gendo's glasses on her lap. We again see Gendo's blurry perspective, this time on his son, which we cannot see. Gendo considers Misato a highly capable individual to whom he listens carefully for each military operation. However, his relationship with Katsuragi is a distant one, from which we can see on this image. The only close to him are Kozo, and as we saw previously, Ritsuko and Rei. Gendo knows Misato is Shinji's guardian, and no one might be more aware of his son's well-being, both physically and mentally. Nevertheless, he never asks her about his condition. Gendo is shown conspiring because for his plan to work out, not only the angels, Eva 1 and Lilith have to be on a desired state, but also he has to cut all the red tape from the bureaucracy of world governments and block any attempts from those governments and the private sector to provide an alternative to the Evangelion units that are piloted by children and have a limited power supply. For that, he uses Kaji and Cele. Of course, all of the information that he and NERV provides are fake and misleading. His personality is so overwhelming that his employees feel more relaxed when he's not around. He has to sell his story to the United Nations. NERV and Cele have been telling the lie for years that there won't be more angels before this new wave. Gendo says that no one expected it at Cele to the Chinese agent, which is another lie. And as the manipulative mastermind that he is, he just says that there is no other alternative now than to defeat them. The jet alone represents a threat, thus Gendo gives the order to get rid of it. A nuclear explosion in the old Tokyo would be perfect to push back any alternative to his Evangelion units. NERV saves the day, with Misato and Shinji, but in fact their actions were only a publicity stunt. As for it was someone else who stopped the nuclear meltdown. Was it Kaji? Or was it Ritsuko? We can only speculate, but Gendo wouldn't have cared less if the jet alone would have exploded, killing Misato in the process. After all, everyone is disposable in order for him to complete his plan, not to mention that he also has Cele's blessing. The jet alone as we see it in Neon Genesis Evangelion doesn't appear in Reveal. Nevertheless, after Kaji escapes the Bethany base in the North Pole with the key of Nebuchadnezzar, a very interesting conversation takes place with Gendo Ikari, in which they tease the possibility that Gendo was conspiring to destroy Unit 5, the third angel, and retrieve that precious packet from it in order to slow down Cele's scenario. Thus this time around is Cele and not other governments the target of his shady operations. This is not the only difference between the editions, as for in the original story, Kaji delivered Adam's embryo to Gendo, to who he called the first human. This of course is not accurate, but there is no reason to tell Kaji the truth. Gendo, although he religiously reports to Cele, he also manipulates them at will, as he says to them that he will capture an angel in embryonic state, sandal form, which causes Cele to protest on such a reckless plan. Gendo manages to impose his strategy. However, he does have a preventing plan, making the UN forces oversight the surroundings of the volcano in case the Misato's plan fails. They would make the whole thing blow up. Of course, the EVA units and its pilots would survive, but the rest of humans around it would not. In Reveal, Cele shows more initiative, as they already began the construction of Mark 6 in the lunar Tagba base, as reported by Kaji. Gendo and Kozo decided to see it by themselves, and although they are not allowed to inspect the Evangelion unit closely, they can see from the distance that the Mark series are built differently from those of NERV. Both agree that Cele knows by now that they cannot trust Ikari anymore. Furthermore, the conversation between Gendo and Kozo regarding humanity's role in this post-apocalyptic world makes clear their different perspectives. Kozo prefers a world corrupted by humans than that one of Celes, the Gulf Doors, a world where no one with an original sin can enter. However, Gendo believes that the problem is humanity and chaos. A similar conclusion he reaches in Neon Genesis Evangelion, when he tries to refresh himself submerging his feet in cold water without anyone noticing, trying to keep his obscure profile. The real enemy of humanity are not the angels, but humanity itself. When Shinji becomes a bit more confident, he tries to communicate with Gendo. After all, that is his whole motivation: be accepted by his father. Thus, he tries to call him to ask him to come to his school for a meeting concerning his future. For this is only natural. Gendo rejects Shinji once again, tells him to talk to Misato and stop wasting his time. This is very interesting for two reasons. The first one, Gendo thus takes the call, knowing it was his son instead of just ignoring it. And secondly, it can be argued that Gendo knows that Shinji concerning about his future is nonsense, because if his plan or Celes go through, then there's not going to be a future for him, at least not how he expects it. Ikari is the kind of leader that doesn't hesitate to pull from hard physical work to accomplish his goals, as he uses his own hands, together with his subordinates, to prepare the Evangelion units when there is no power in the headquarters. This causes admiration not only in Shinji but also in Ritsuko, for both of them find hard to hide their excitement watching him in action, while Dr. Akagi tells to the boy that his father had faith in them to come in time. While Gendo was in space during the Reveal's timeline, in the original one he was in the South Pole, the conversation between him and Kozo is similar to that one that they had in orbit. They do not talk about chaos this time, but science. Gendo defends humanity's ability for survival, while Kozo again has a different perspective. On his opinion, this is a punishment from God. This conversation between both men are important, because they will let us know that although allies, they do have different views about the future. Gendo is comfortable with purification and death, while Kozo envisions a future with life. During this sequence, Misato is left in charge of NERV's operations back in Japan. Even although Misato doesn't know everything that is happening, she knows enough to be trustworthy. Misato describes her father to Shinji. She calls him a weak man that escapes reality, that reality called family. Shinji sees his father's reflection in that. The story of Dr. Katsuragi is different to that one of Gendo, but both Misato and Shinji feel that both men behave the same in many ways. Furthermore, it can be argued that Shinji also behaves the same way. After all, both Shinji and Gendo are very similar. Shinji understands what Misato is saying. He mustn't run away. Misato says that the only miracles with value are the ones you work for. And that is exactly what happened. Not only Shinji was able to stop and defeat Sahakiel with his female friends, but finally he gets praised by his father, an iconic and powerful moment that happened in both editions. The show does an emphasis to remind us on how not only NERV personnel is afraid of Gendo Ikari's characters as a boss, but also his two more closest allies. As for both Kozo and Ritsuko highlight how Gendo will give them a lecture if they screw it up somehow. The tone how both of them say, however, is different. Kozo is more serious, while Ritsuko is softer about it. This is a hint on how both of these characters have a different type of personal relationship with Gendo. All this happens before Iriel, the original 11th Angel, attack to the EVA units during a test. This puts the headquarters and the entire personnel on maximal alert. Everyone scrambles until Gendo appears, showing once again how calculative mind he is takes control of the situation, sets the alarm off and orders to report both the governments and Celes that all of it was just a malfunction in the security system. Even during an emergency, Gendo is able to manipulate and conspire against his adversaries. After the situation is put temporarily under control, both Misato and Ritsuko comes up with different plans to defeat the angel. Misato wants to destroy the Magi, while Ritsuko wants to use it to accelerate its evolution and by doing so killing it. After life, there is death. Gendo hears both of them out and goes with Ritsuko's plan. As a scientist, he understands her plan to be the safest one and puts his confidence in her. Ritsuko confesses to Misato that she did not like her mother for many reasons, but probably at that time of the story was the relationship that Naoko had with Gendo. As for Ritsuko is jealous and wants to replace her in every way. After the 11th Angel gets defeated, Cele brings Gendo in for a special meeting. They know he lied to them. Actually, they are very well informed of everything that happened. They have a very good informant, to the point that they are able to describe with detail the extent of the attack, all the way to the dogma. Gendo, however, insists in his lie. He doesn't hesitate for a moment in his iconic pose. Cele knows that Gendo is not only hiding important information, but also is capable of betraying them, and Cele can get rid of Gendo in no time. After all, they hold all the financial and political power, but they don't. And the reason behind it is that there is no one else at that point that is able to do what they are asking for, so they will be putting him on a short leash. Gendo thus says the truth in his final line: everything is going according to Cele's plan, at least for now. After Eva Zero goes berserk with Shinji with him, Koso and Gendo had a conversation, in which they are discussing both Cele and his own plan or script. The 11th Angel was a miscalculation, and the Berserk Unit Zero wasn't in their plan either, to which Gendo says that it doesn't matter because of Rei. Koso shows concern about his relationship with the first child, which may indicate that he either is concerned that he is not going to be able to do what he plans to do, sacrificing Rei, or Rei is actually replacing Yui's role in his life. In a subsequent conversation aboard of a helicopter, Koso is reminding Gendo how upset Cele is regarding his behavior. Gendo replies that everything is going as they want, and they go over all the things put in motion again. But when Koso brings up Rei, Gendo just keeps quiet. Koso just moves on with the conversation and Gendo keeps answering the questions. It is obvious that whatever feeling that Gendo has with this particular Rei 2, has transcended both mega expectations. The cemetery scene is one of the most iconic ones in the stories. It does appear in both, but at different times. In the original story happens in episode 15, which is the episode when Misato discovers the angel in the dogma. That is way after Sakiel's attack, and Shinji gets praised by his father. In Reveal happens early in the second film, before Sakiel's attack and asks an introduction to the story. Shinji hasn't been praised by his father yet. However, both sequences are executed very similarly. Here we see frames with both seeing at the same direction, front of the camera, and we get more on how both father and son see Yui, especially Gendo, who does remember her every day. Gendo states that he threw away all of Yui's pictures, probably because he didn't want anyone to find out her resemblance to Rei, which later in Reveal Q plays a role. As for Koso, did keep one for himself, but also it could mean that only he has the right to remember Yui. He's Yui, not Shinji's mother. This is followed by Gendo boarding a vessel with Rei, which Shinji notices right away. This is a message to Shinji. Not only is his Yui, but also is his Rei. Yui is everything for Gendo Ikari. Her disappearance meant the end for him. His only goal is to reunite with his wife, even if it means bringing his own death and the end of the world. One of the reasons why his relationship with Shinji is so difficult for him is that reminds him of Yui. It is the remaining connection, one that he rejects and the reason why he sent his son away. Yui is the reason why father and son cannot be together. After a wedding where the three old friends attended, Ritsuko has no problems in giving her opinion about her friend's relationship, hiding her own. As for her relationship with her boss was always a mystery and barely touched on, which may indicate that Gendo and only Gendo wanted it that way. Rei might have learned something about Gendo, and that is her way on staring at people. As for when Shinji disappeared during Leleel's attack, Rei gives a Gendo-like look to Asuka when she was complaining about Shinji's recklessness. Rei is as concerned for Shinji as Gendo is for Unit 1. When Ritsuko tells to Misato that the priority is the Evangelion unit, that is her lover's wishes and orders. She still hides all of it to her friend on his behalf. The sequence in which Shinji confronts Leleel in the train tells us more about how he sees his relationship with his father. As for his reflection points out that his personality is due to that. At the storyline, the symbolizing his boys, his congratulations, and his abandonment are highlighted as crucial moments that forge Shinji's persona. From Shinji's perspective, his father only wants a tool for his means, not a son. During these sequences, we also discover something that I highlighted early on this video. After Yui's disappearance, Gendo was accused and charged as the murderer of his wife. He was declared not guilty, but all of these also affected his relationship with his son. Did the court order Shinji to be separated from his father during trial? We do not know, but this might be a possibility given how notorious the case was. Gendo Ikari might have walked away as a free man, but society already saw him as a wife murderer and condemned him for that. Shinji sees his father in many negative ways, but as the murderer of his mother is not one of them. He believes in his father's innocence after all. There is no indication whatsoever in any of the editions that Shinji blames him for that, at least not directly. In the aftermath of Leleel's attack, Gendo doesn't react to any of Ritsuko's comment. His only concern is to push his plan forward. What others discovers, their feelings toward him, all of that is irrelevant. The first time we see Cele interact directly with other than Gendo is with Misato, who presents a report after the angel attack, and how this is the first time in the story that one of them tried to communicate with a human. Cele's intention was to interrogate Shinji, but Misato refused due to health concerns. But it's hard not to think that this is not the whole truth, as for it's not in Gendo's interest for Shinji to have direct interactions with Cele. So it's likely that it was also an order from the commander. He allowed Misato to be interrogated this time. She doesn't know too much about the hidden agenda, she is a high-ranking official and knows how to follow orders. It is a safe decision. Gendo is in the shadows listening as we are unveiled. And in his opinion, the angels are evolving, becoming more intelligent, and advises Cele to push the agenda forward. After Unit 4's disappearance in Nevada, Gendo meets with Ritsuko. They are discussing the failsafe device known as the dummy plug, more precisely the nerve-developed Ray model, which Gendo orders to put in both Units 1 and 2. He doesn't have any issues talking about his shady business with Ritsuko in front of Ray, who clearly can't hear it all. He once again asks Ray for a meal together, under Akagi's jealous gaze. Now it's not only Kozo who is growing concerned, but his lover sees in Ray an unbeatable competitor, just before we cut to a healthier relationship. Shinji goes with Toji to Ray's apartment, and Toji takes a look at Gendo's glasses. He is not through the glass like Shinji and Ray were before, he's on a side. For Gendo, Toji is irrelevant, not worth seeing at. Shinji starts cleaning her apartment a bit, for which he gets thanks out of Ray. The introvert girl that notably was having problems communicating, now is blushing for a boy of her age. This will make Ray think about her relationship with her creator. She never thanked him for anything. Perhaps because Gendo has never done something for her uninterested, selflessly. In Reveal, this sequence plays out differently. This time Ray thanks Shinji for one of his outstanding bento boxes. You thought that would do the trick only for Asuka? Well, think again, buddy. Gendo enjoys having Ray closer, enjoying meals with her. In Reveal, the girl proposes a dinner with his son, as for he enjoys eating with people so much. Gendo is hesitant to the idea at first, but after seeing Yui's on Gray's face and remembering her wishes, he accepts. This is the danger that Gendo faces each day, giving himself up to the idea that the way he could replace his wife is with this 14-year-old clone. However, she is not his wife, but a tool that will allow him to reunite with her. Cele is not happy about Unit 4's disappearance, and this time it seems Gendo had nothing to do with it, in contrast to what happened to Unit 5 in the Bethany base. Cele hates things not going according to their plan, and forces Gendo to accept Unit 3, but Gendo wants more resources to repair Unit 0, Ray's unit. Cele refuses. There were enough setbacks already under his watch. It's time to move forward, as for their intention is to reach what they call the true Evangelion, a true god, as Kozo pointed out. For this, Gendo's time is running out. He still has a small window to awake Unit 1, and he will take that opportunity. In the original story, there is no Unit 5 as in Reveal, or Mark 6 for that matter, so this sequence doesn't occur. Instead, we get yet another conversation between Kozo and Gendo while seeing a futuristic city fortress in the background, and yet again, we hear the difference of opinion that exists between both men. Kozo has a more positive view about humanity willing to exist in the future, in a paradise they will build, not matter the challenges, and Gendo well, again more pessimistic, always focusing in reuniting with Yui, even without saying her name or referencing her. His goal is to cause the end of the world, and he will take everyone down in his path, including the angry men at Sele. Gendo's influence on Rei can be seen while witnessing a discussion between Asuka and Shinji at school. The Gendo pose is the one that she uses when studying a situation, just like her creator. At this point, Rei is growing. She is acquiring a personality and learning how to think as an individual, so she imitates what other humans do. Unit 3 gets possessed by Bardiel and causes an explosion in Matsushiro, causing communications go dark. Because of Misato's disappearance, now Gendo is in control for the first time of the entire operations. He needs to stop the angel whatever it takes. This causes uncertainty in Shinji, as for this will be the first time he will be receiving orders from his father in the battlefield. Bardiel approaches to the city and Gendo orders the entry block to be ejected. Now this is very important. The reason why the angel prevents this to happen is because it needs the pilot. After all, Unit 3 doesn't have an internal power source other than the angel itself. By injecting the pilot, Gendo hoped to deactivate the unit remotely with minimum damages. Another explosion like that one from Nevada wouldn't be good news. Gendo tells Shinji that what he sees in front of him is not a kid like him, but instead is the enemy, taking away any humanity so it would be easier to kill. Rei will confront the angel first. Bardiel moves quickly and subdues her while trying to infect her arm. Gendo without hesitation orders it to cut it off before it happens. Maya is aware of the pain that this might inflict to the pilot and protests the decision. Gendo orders to proceed. It's better to have a limbless Rei than no Rei at all. The angel then attacks Unit 1 without resistance and starts choking Shinji. Gozo orders to lower the zinc ray to ease the pain. Gendo refuses. Let the kid feel the pain and asks him why he's not fighting back, but the way he asks is different this time. He doesn't ask as a Commander Ikari, but like a father asking a question to his son. After all what Shinji has gone through, it has a special meaning when his father asks him directly. All of his life he has been waiting for an opportunity to prove himself to him, and he's failing, because of morals, but his father sees it as a weakness. Gendo loses it, which is extremely uncharacteristic. He really hates when he cannot control someone or something to achieve his goal. And this is one of those rare occasions. One thing is if you fight and fail, another very different is when you just quit. He cannot stand it, and orders the experimental dummy plug to be activated. Anything would be better than that failure of a pilot. Shinji loses control of the unit and the Rei model starts its job, completely destroying the unit. Gendo smiles, regain control of the situation, and even more important, the dummy plug worked as expected. Shinji asks his father desperately to stop this bloodbath. Gendo just keeps silence. There are some differences in the same sequence in Rebuild. First of all, Asuka is the pilot, which has more meaning to Shinji and the audience, and Unit 0 is put in standby. It doesn't participate in the battle due to the lack of repairs. And the angel has an extra pair of arms. Gendo does get mad again, but doesn't lose it the same way, as he doesn't stand up from his seat shouting. The Rei model dummy plug is replaced by the DMYSYS. Everything else, however, plays out the same way. But instead of destroying the entry plug by crushing it with his hand, this time Unit 1 buys it with Asuka inside it. In the aftermath, Shinji goes ballistic. More in Rebuild than in the original story, where he's threatening to destroy everything. Everything that his father has worked for, and everyone inside. The people that have helped him, also Rei. What his dad did, destroying a friend's life, someone that he cares about, using his own hands. And little he knows, because the proxy was his own mother. On his rant, the Nerve personnel try to reason with him. Doesn't work. He wants to know why his father uses such extreme measures. The barriers are down. He's not afraid anymore. Anger has overtaken the young boy. Gendo doesn't have time for childish behaviors and orders to put him to sleep by increasing LCL concentration levels within the entry block. His father rather choke him to sleep than to speak to him or give him any kind of explanations. And again, Red, the cruel and painful reality. Shinji blames his father for everything wrong with his life. All of it, as we see in his conversation in the train. He wanted his father to protect him. He didn't for different reasons. Being afraid of being a father is one of them. Rei asks him if he tried to understand him. He said he tried, and then confronts his younger version. While insisting his reflection gets even closer, he's lying to himself. He confronts his father, who lists the charges against him, and gives him the opportunity to speak out, directly this time. The distance between them is abysmal. Shinji decides to leave. Not before his father gave him a last advice before asking him if he was running away again. He needs to sacrifice everything for what he wants, something that Gendo has done and continues to do so every day. In the original story, this meeting plays out with a red background and plays out almost the same. It doesn't give any advice to him. He just highlights the big disappointment he is and that he doesn't want to see him again. Shinji leaves NERV for the second time, and for Gendo he's not Shinji anymore, he's the third child, and orders to reprogram Unit 1 for Rei and the dummy plug as a backup. Again, Gendo replaces Shinji with Rei. But in reveal that doesn't happen. The dummy plug will be the pilot, no need for backup. Sarella attacks and Rei is put into Unit 1, but the EVA rejects her. Yui is not happy with how Shinji thus rejects Gendo and his attempt to replace him. Then Rei is put to Unit 0, and after Asuka is defeated, the first child emerges with her EVA with an end to mind. This is her decision, one that induces a shout by Gendo, seeing her going rogue. He was surprised, again something unexpected, and again an uncharacteristic reaction. In reveal, Rei does something similar saving Mari aboard Unit 2, but Gendo is not shown to have any reaction during the sequence, probably because he needed it to happen to awake Unit 1, but the unit, Yui, keeps rejecting him, not the dummy plug. We then get a recreation of the beginning of the story, an angel attacking the city and Shinji confronting his father with Yui in the middle. But this time around, Shinji is demanding to pilot the Evangelion unit. This causes no reaction in the original timeline, but in reveal Gendo shows a subtle but meaningful reaction. He's impressed by the display of self-confidence of his boy. He won't deny Shinji his wish, mostly because he doesn't have a choice, and in reveal specifically will be because of a stroke of good luck to awake the unit. The scenario for his plan can happen right there, in a few moments. Unit 1 awakes and Gendo is happy. Cele will not. In reveal, Shinji, by saving Rei, initiates the event later known as the Near-Third Impact. Kozo affirms that this was their plan all along. Another manipulation by Gendo, the last one we will witness in a storyline that underwent a time jump of 14 years into the future. Cele is scrambling, don't want more surprises, despite being informed Kaji is indeed at risk, and thus goes for any piece of information he can get. Gendo and Kozo explain that was an unexpected event. Anticipated? Perhaps, but unexpected? Well, I won't go that far. After all, in both storylines it was a very important part of Gendo's scenario. Cele wants to know what Gendo intends to do with the Awoken Unit 1, and the answer is nothing. He worked very hard, a lot of sacrifices were made on his behalf for this to happen. He's not going to expose the EVA to any risks for now. It will remain frozen for the time being. In the next few sequences, we are unveiled more on Shinji's perception of his father. He sees him as his enemy, an eyeless monster that sees down to him as a pathetic prey. At that point, after Unit 3 incident, Shinji believes that Gendo is able to do anything, even killing his mother. This is the first time that he directly accuses his father of doing so. He even takes a knife and aims to stab that monster. But then Rei interrupts the sequence. But who is Rei other than a clone of his mother? Rei was again pushing the question she asked in a previous episode. Have you tried to understand your father? Shinji finally gives an answer. He just can't, and blames Rei for his abandonment. After all, he had her to replace him. At least that is how he sees it. Yui shares a memory, and Shinji can hear his father talking to his mother. We can hear the different perspective from both of his parents before he was born. Gendo believes that the world in its current state is no place for a kid, but Yui sees over it, beyond it. As long as he has the will to live, he will be able to achieve happiness. Gendo agrees with that thought. If there is someone more manipulative in the Evangelion stories in its entirety than Gendo, that is Yui. No wonder why Gendo is so attached to her. Gendo tells Yui that if they get a boy, he will name him Shinji. If a girl, then she will be Rei. This is important because Gendo decided to call Yui's clone after the girl he never had with Yui. He could have given her a different name, but instead he stuck with Rei. After Shinji rebirthed, Misato left Ritsuko and ran towards Kaji. Akagi's thoughts are a wish. She would like to be with her lover right now. Pretty obvious that Gendo doesn't give Ritsuko enough attention. Sele had enough and kidnaps Koso. It's time for them to know the truth without Gendo's interference. Sele insists that they do not intend to create a new god and see the awakening of Unit 1 as one. At least that is what they say, but they do need one as we get to see in the end of Evangelion. This is different from Reveal, when they actually recognize that they wanted to create a new god. Koso is not scared, actually, he is relaxed. He's an old dog and knows Sele pretty well. He knows that he is safe and they just want a chat. He even jokes around. I imagine that after having to tolerate a brick of a character like Gendo every day for years now, he finds Kirk Lawrence a fun guy to hang out with. Koso starts remembering the past, and the first person he talks about is no other but the main cause of all this mess, Yui Ikari, who finally gets screen time. Now, all of these sequences might be altered a bit, because we are being told the story from Koso's perspective, very different from what happened in 3+1 when we are told the story from Gendo's perspective, so bear that in mind. Two different men and a love triangle with Yui as a centerpiece. Koso remembers Yui as a brilliant scientist and admires her since their first interaction. Yui is smart, she wants to pique her professor's interest, and boy she does. As for she says all the right things a man of his age and experience wants to hear. Then he remembers one Rokobungi Gendo, a troubled young man that got into a brawl and put in jail for that reason. Gendo asked to be under custody of Koso. This is not by chance, as it seems that it was part of a plan. Yui's perhaps? Yes, as Koso heard rumors that Yui was being supported by Sele at the time. Yui Ikari is always presented as a pure innocent woman, but we always heard this story from different men that loves her, Gendo, Koso, and Shinji, for being a wife, a scientist, and a mother. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Yui was as pure as we are being told. She did come up with many of the horrors that happened later. To get the support of an ancient and evil organization like Sele, she ought to have been not only an outstanding scientist, but also a calculative and manipulative mind, just as her husband. A perfect match. Yui tells Koso that Gendo is a kind human being, which goes in line from what we see in 3+1, but Koso cannot hide his surprise by this information. If someone as pure as Yui believes that, then she's being manipulated and lied by that horrible Rokobungi brat. Little he knew at the time. After the second impact, Koso and Gendo met again in the South Pole. He informs him that he married Yui, and he's now known as Gendo Ikari, for he took his wife's name. Different from Reveal, where he is Gendo Ikari while Yui's last name was Ayanami. Gendo informs him that they are expecting, and his facial expression is of a happy man, because although the world has ended, he was at peace. Very uncharacteristic from the Gendo we know, the Gendo he will become. He still resists to the idea of joining Sele, as we are let know very clear that both Gendo and Yui are part of this organization. Koso is a smart guy. He can see all the manipulation around him. Sele wants him to validate their story, he resists, for now. Koso starts giving us a huge info dump of Evangelion lore while reading an Otaku's magazine? Garage Kids, animation, live action SFX, and even Ultraman. This is just one of those jokes that Anno likes to throw around. As a man of integrity, Koso embarks himself in the quest to expose that evil organization named Sele, and will take everyone down to achieve it, even if his path takes him to Yui Ikari, who was at the stairs of the lab when they finally met again. He ignores her. He knows that Yui can use her charms to tempt him a trap, to reel him in again, as she knows exactly what buttons to push. That is the reason why he doesn't confront Yui. He will confront Gendo instead. Yui fails in her attempt and watches him walk by, but won't stop him. She trusts Gendo will figure it out. After all, she's married to the guy. Gendo is now a director for a UN research department. Every time Koso and Gendo met, Gendo was climbing ranks, gaining power, influence, earning Sele's respect. Koso accuses Gendo for conspiring against humanity with Sele, while showing him the proof he had. But how Koso was able to get his hand over all of this information before everyone else in the world, before intelligence agencies or newspapers? Well, probably because Yui allowed him to find out. That is why he doesn't show any surprise and immediately offers him a job within the department. Gendo, as Yui, know when and how to lie, but they also know when to tell the truth. And if they wanted Koso on board, it was time for just that. He shows Koso what they've been working on, takes him immediately to meet with an acquaintance, Naoko Akagi, who had a bigger role at that time than Yui did. All of this in front of a young brunette, Ritsuko. Then both scientists introduce him to EVA Zero, Project E, something that not even a man of morals and integrity can resist. His scientific curiosity overcomes him. Now again, all of this is from Koso's perspective. He's telling the story as he remembers it. A dark room, shiny bright lights, shady figures. He's basically saying he was a victim being seduced by sinister minds, and thus, by his own will, without threats, ultimatums, or violence, Koso accepts to join the project. Yui's ghost haunts Ritsuko, as she is very well aware where she is at watching Unit 1. She knows that she is no replacement in her boss's heart. Not even her mother was, who was arguably a better candidate than she is. In the next few sequences, we are unveiled that Koso and Yui felt their lives were in danger, as they have discovered what happened in the South Pole, an incident that Sele intends to provoke again in a few years. The conversation between both of them is the most important discussion in Evangelion lore, as for we are reveal her true intentions, her own scenario, one that will play out in both the end of Evangelion and in Revealed. Yui understands Sele very well, as for some official sources have confirmed that she is in fact daughter of one of its members, and according to this sequence her goal is to prevent their intentions. What exactly could that scenario be? Well, we do not officially know the details. We only know that she was satisfied with both endings. We also know that none of the endings were Sele's nor Gendo's. Even though Gendo's was similar to that one of Yui, was not exactly the same, as for it doesn't seem that Yui had the intention for Gendo to try to reunite with her the way he envisioned. Thus, now we know what they wanted to do. They conspire against Sele, and their goal was to stop them from within the organization. Yui's motivation was her son, Shinji. In the next sequence we are shown the day of her disappearance. Yui was the test subject for Unit 1. Was that always her intention though? This being subject for multiple debates over the years, especially prior Reveal Q's release in 2012. Naoko follows with a dialogue claiming that she disappeared due to irregular circumstances. However, in Reveal 3rd movie, Koso explained it very clearly to Shinji. That was her intention. She voluntarily tested the EVA control system going into the core herself. Did Gendo knew this in any of the timelines? Hard to say. I like to think he didn't, as he did not prevent it, and then spent the rest of his life trying to reunite with her, abandoning Shinji in the process against her wife's wishes. The day will shape Gendo's personality to the one we get to know for most of the story. He mourned her for a while and disappeared, as Koso pointed out. He was figuring out a way to reunite with his wife, and came up with the idea, human instrumentality, a new project that he will propose to Sele. Why? Well, he needed the resources that only Sele could provide to execute his new hidden plan, but to do so he needed to present them with something that they like. So in a way, Sele's scenario was Gendo's idea. Gendo wastes no time looking for a replacement to fill his physical needs in Naoko Akagi, with who he had an affair and doesn't show to care that the man hasn't forget his deceased wife yet. A newly hired Ritsuko watches them, possibly the beginning of her interest in the man, as for she always tried to replace her mother in every single way. Later, Gendo will present himself with a kid that is not his son, but a daughter of a friend. This girl is Rei 1, and even though later Ritsuko will learn about it, Naoko has no idea what is this all about. But her suspicions were correct. That girl looks a lot like his dead wife. Gendo replaced his son with the daughter he never had with Yui. Naming her Rei is proof of that feeling, who is a clone between his wife's DNA and Lilith. He created her for a purpose, but he knew that not everyone could learn about her background, as for Rei represents a direct defiance to Cele's will. But why he did that? Why Gendo would create Rei the way he did? Well, in my opinion, was a way to keep Lilith on check. As long as Lilith's soul remained under his care, the second angel wouldn't come back to life until the right moment. This thought, however, is subjective. The next sequence is one of the most unfamous but iconic ones from the Neon Genesis Evangelion story, and that involves the murder of a child. Rei, who got lost in the facilities, finds herself in the control center with Naoko, who offers to help her. An evil-looking Rei insults her. This causes anger in Naoko, even before Rei highlights that is the way Gendo calls her. Naoko now understands that she is replaceable and mindlessly chokes the child to death, while stating that anyone can be replaced. Gendo did replace Shinji with Rei 1 with Rei 2, and this one with Rei 3, and Naoko with Ritsuko. The only one irreplaceable for him is and always will be Yui. After seeing what she just did, committed suicide. Her life was over. This was also the end for Garen, as for the next day, Cele dissolved it and created NERV, transferring everyone to the newly formed organization. Everyone but one. This is the background we get in the original story from Kouso's perspective. In Reveal, we get it from Gendo. I will go over it later on this video. Arail attacks on Unit 1 is still being preserved. Gendo won't use it anymore unless it's absolutely necessary. What will he? Yui has awakened, finally. Not need to put her at risk. Asuka has been put out by the angel who threatens her life. Misato scrambles because of the altitude. It's not an easy target to hit. Shinji implores his father to let him fight and save Asuka. He refuses, doesn't care, and it's too big of a risk. Instead orders Rei to use the Spirit of Longinus. Even Kouso is shocked by this decision. Then he explains to him that Cele is taking advantage by producing the mass production Evangelion series, and now is the time to get rid of the thing, because Longinus is a god killer weapon. Cele needs it in case things don't go their way, perfect to stop Gendo in case he betrays them. So using it and losing it under the excuse that it was the last resort decision was just too good of an opportunity to miss on. And even though he doesn't have a particular interest in Asuka's life, he does need Eva 2 for the battle to come, especially if Cele will be coming with an army of Evas. And of course Cele gets angry again after Arail's defeat. Longinus is orbiting around the Earth, it will later land on the moon. Gendo insists that he had no choice, Cele doesn't buy it. Why would they? Gendo has lied to them way too much already. And in the middle of the interrogation, Armicel attacks, saved by the phone that rings. Gendo leaves, but it's pretty clear that Cele will take action very soon. Rei will be in charge to fight the angel this time around, and Gendo orders to put Asuka in Unit 2. Even if she cannot sync, he's willing to use her as a decoy. He can care less for the life of that pilot. In contrast to Rei, when she needed help, Gendo lifted the suspension of Unit 1 to allow Shinji to save her. He does this calmly. He doesn't overreact or make something out of character. For the rest of the sequence, he will behave in line with his general persona. Interesting to say the least, as for Rei 2 will sacrifice herself here. As this is happening, we don't see Gendo's reaction. It's like he's not there. We do see, however, Gendo's face, the idealized version of Gendo without glasses, with a smile, her creator, her father, the last memory of Rei 2. She tries to reach out to that Gendo she sees on her head to get to that happiness before her demise. Cele had enough with Eva Zero destruction, they will now work against Gendo. They let Kouso go, but this time will be different. They need a human sacrifice, someone that Gendo will let go for good. They think on Rei, Gendo denies that request, instead he sends Ritsuko, the third in line. She is disposable and reliable enough to be sure won't betray him. He knows pretty well she is in love with him, so he uses that in his favor, or at least tries to. He and Kouso are in front of Rei's tank, and Kouso confesses that Rei was the product of his own desperation. He didn't like having her around, it was just weird. But as the person who knows Ikari the most, he knows Gendo is not the kind of man that let things go easily, so he won't protest having a third one. After being exposed to Cele, Ritsuko became an unknown variant. She now feels betrayed and heartbroken by the man she loves, and starts planning her revenge. It's time to expose him. Shinji met with Rei 3, who is obviously a different Rei. This is while she's trying to understand what she is herself. This is before Ritsuko shows him the truth with Misato pointing her gun at her. The transition of events from the lab to the graveyard where Yui died, to finally end up in the dummy block main plant, works to hint to Shinji that Rei is something made by his father using his mother, and as long as there is more Reis, Ritsuko will never achieve his father's love. That is why she hates them, and proceeds to kill all of the soulless clones. Rei 3 will be the last one. If she dies, Gendo won't have a replacement. Her own word let us know how madly in love she is with Gendo, to the point of humiliating herself if he asked for it. Which she did, but she realized that she will never be able to replace Rei, not to mention Yui. Shinji doesn't understand what Rei is, furthermore, he doesn't get what she is for his father. A daughter? A wife? All of it is very surreal. There have been points in the story that it seems that Gendo also gets confused. Seeing his wife's face erased in revealed second movie is proof of that. Who can say that that was the only occasion that happened? Chances are that it wasn't. Ritsuko, put under custody for destroying the clones, is visited by Gendo. She's turned around, giving her back to him. She has betrayed him. He gives her a chance to explain herself. This may be an indication on how he is growing mistrust in his own people. After all, Ritsuko is, or was, number 3. He is looking for answers, wants to know why she has abandoned him. Which is hilarious because Ritsuko feels it's the other way around. Ritsuko says something really concerning, and it seems to indicate that Gendo forced himself to her at least once. Or that is her interpretation. This line has been open to debate for years for how he behaves intimately with women, including Rei. In my opinion, develop an argument for something that Ritsuko said in a lower point, when she's vulnerable and exposed, is a very weak basis for the theories that says that Gendo was an abuser. Anno would have shown something else. As a very visual director, he would have put somewhere an image for interpretation. There is none, only a line in dialogue. Thus, I reject that theory, but you can make your own mind. Cele has put their planned response to Gendo in motion, sending a new child, a 5th one, Kaoru, right to NERV, under the excuse there will be a replacement for Asuka. This unknown variable will be head scratcher for everyone at the Geofront. He doesn't have a background, he appears all of a sudden and has an outstanding sync rate with Unit 2. Something is off, even more concerning when he interacts with Rei. Not good. Cele openly talks for relieving Ikari as soon as possible. He has become an obstacle. Gendo knows this. One more angel and he can put the final stage of his plan in motion, and asks Yui to hold on a little bit more. Even one side from this angle seems angry. It may seem that Yui is not so on board with this idea. Kaoru, who is the recipient of Adam's soul, is ordered by Cele to get his body back, for he was instructed all of his life that this was his only purpose. His body of course is implanted in Gendo's hand, but Cele doesn't refer to that. They refer to Lilith, the forbidden union between Adam and Lilith, so they lied to him, blaming Gendo for all of the sins and portraying him as the ultimate enemy. By saying that Adam exists within Gendo, Kaoru sees that both of them are the same. This is again confirmed and revealed where he calls him father. But Cele doesn't know something really important. Lilith's soul is not in Lilith's body. It is in Rei 3, and there are no indications whatsoever that Cele is aware of this. They don't even suspect what Rei actually is. The time has come. It's time for instrumentality under Cele's scenario. Kaoru starts his incursion into the terminal dogma. Gozo and Gendo understand that this is Cele's doing. They want to step up and force their script. There are only 2 options for Gendo now. Either stop Cele's plan or start their own version of human instrumentality. They will try to stop Kaoru first. After a massive plot hole in which we see Cele talking that is Unit 1 the one that should start instrumentality? Gendo sends his sons to stop the angel. The reason is simpler than you think, and it's not a poetic tragedy one. It's that it's the only pilot available. Unit 0 is destroyed and Unit 2 kidnapped, so he has no option. Shinji kills Kaoru and the table is finally set as we move to the end of the story. I'm going to stop Gendo's profile in the original story right here for 2 reasons. Number 1, I already made a full analysis of original episodes 25 and 26 in which I went over all of the characters, so I will be repeating myself if I go over it again. And the second one is that I'm currently in the midway of developing a series of analysis of the end of Evangelion in which I am also including Gendo. You can find those videos in the description section down below. But I'm not going to let you go just like that, as for there is still a very important part of Gendo's story that tells a lot about his persona. Let's skip forward. After trying to defeat his father in the battlefield, Shinji realized that it was useless. He had to come up with another strategy, one that he was aware of since early in the story, but never considered. That was trying to understand his father. He asked him what exactly he's trying to do. Gendo explains to him the final stage of his plan and how it's going to play out. He wants to bring peace through destruction, and through it, reunite with Yui. That is his wish. While doing so, Gendo starts remembering Yui, but he's confusing Yui with Rei. This is a confirmation that the man always had trouble differentiating them, telling them apart. A concern that was brought out by Koso several times throughout the stories. Koso, who doesn't have a role anymore at that part of the story, agrees to cooperate with Mary. Because in contrast to Gendo, he believed that humanity could evolve and overcome its challenges without total self-annihilation. This goes in line with Yui's wishes, which Mary is trying to fulfill as for the only way to stop the current situation. Koso then, after accomplishing everything he wanted, ends his story. Shinji, without crying nor screaming, asks his father to stop this madness. Gendo doesn't run away from his son, he's willing to hear him out. His son accepts that he's had his share of responsibility by avoiding talking directly to him, but that is going to change now. He wants to know his father better. Gendo, without eyes, displays an 80 field, the unbreakable shield that protects human emotions and individuality. Shinji is able to go through it. Gendo is opening up to his son. He tells the story of a boy that grew into a man, being misunderstood, living an antisocial life that will prevent him of being hurt, which is the Hedgehog Dilemma. He found what he needed in books and music, in part because he never knew paternal love. He grew up without family. But then he took his blindfold off and saw Yui, who became the love of his life, show him other ways of appreciating it, and quickly became madly attached to her. They had a son, but this was too much for Gendo. He was terrified of becoming a father, but he holds himself together because Yui was there, his strength and main motivation moving forward. After losing her, he went into madness, couldn't accept it, and saw that through the Human Instrumentality Project, that in reveal was proposed by Dr. Katsuragi and not himself as in the original story. He found a possibility to turn his wish into a reality. Gendo recovers his eyes, but still doesn't want to see. Shinji, a young boy now, tells him that it's because he is unwilling to accept his weakness, but he knows that Gendo is very well aware of this. Misato interrupts their conversation and Gendo accepts what is coming. Wily came up with an idea to stop his plan. As Koso said many times before, humanity will overcome its misfortunes without the need of a god. He can see that now and accepts it. He won't be able to reunite with Yui with his plan. Mari confirms that the idea of Yui was to return everything to normal, as she clearly exclaims in the Spear of Gaius. Shinji accepts Misato's gift and thanks her for her sacrifice. Gendo is in awe on seeing how his teenage son is able to do it, knowing how close Misato and Shinji were. He's not that brat who acted by impulse and ran away in the past. Gendo then explains that a wish entitles a sacrifice, and tries to justify this decision of abandoning his son through that logic. After all, this was the best for both of them. But now he can see it. That was a mistake. He turns around and asks for forgiveness. And here is where it happens. Here is where Gendo was finally able to find Yui. She was always there, in their son. His story gets to an end. Now he will be joining Yui through redemption, by sacrificing himself holding his beloved wife in his arms, saying bye-bye to all of Evangelion, and thus giving their son a new life in a world without Evas. Gendo Ikari's life was filled with manipulation, lies, and deception. He was willing to bring down the end of the world and annihilating everyone within just to fulfill his desires, which involve a serious state of denial to that he holds dearest and couldn't see it go. An unhealthy state of mind of a genius madman that brings respect and admiration for those that either sympathize with his cause or empathize with his motives. For all of these reasons, the name of Gendo Ikari will be remembered as one of the best anti-heroes in history of anime. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the like if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can join the Discord for free. The link is down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video with me today. And as always, I wish you all a wonderful day.